green, but I tell you what, that's full share material right there. Great job. All right, well, from what I understand, we've got some experience stepping to the deck right now. He is crab, trolled, seined, and long-lined halibut from Washington State to Southeast Alaska and Bristol Bay. Hailing out of Bellingham, Washington, Buck Meloy.
This the one? This one's getting the best reports. Okay, after that introduction, I don't know what to say. Didn't sound like me, but close enough. And I want to know if Neil Funt can hear me. If Neil can't hear me, then, you know, maybe nobody can. Okay, thank you. I'm trying to help people become fishermen if they want. You too can be a bow picker. I spend a tremendous amount of my time on the ocean simply sitting in the pilot seat of my bow picker, the Spindrift 3. In case you aren't familiar with salmon gill netting, a bow picker is a commonly used style of boat. It's called a bow picker because the work deck and fishing equipment are in the bow, which is the front end of the boat. And any fish landed are picked right there. My pilot seat gives me a good view of the whole foredeck. I am a bow picker who owns his own bow picker. Got it? Salmon gill netting is a hurry up and wait sort of undertaking. Fishing time is limited. The best tides pass quickly, and of course one always has to beat the other guy to the hot spots, or at least the imagined hot spots. Once in that hot spot, with the net deployed and arcing upwind from the bow, there often isn't much to do but keep a casual eye on it for signs that it may be time to pick fish from the net or that circumstances are making the set unproductive or dangerous. A typical amount of time between putting the net into the water and retrieving it is about 2 hours. Not everyone does it that way. Some guys like to set their gear in shallow water right at the edge of huge breaking waves. They are tightly strung fellows who thrive on the energy of the jittery, difficult, dangerous places that require full-time focused attention, instant responses, and balls to the walls, staccato activity. Not me. I would rather get my thrills by watching the grass grow. Or on the water by studying the formation and interreactions of ripples on its surface. From my pilot seat, I can contemplate the equipment that works the magic of hauling my net, dogging the reel to hold it in place, pumping high-pressure water to spray jellyfish and eelgrass out of the web, and numerous lesser tasks. Would you like to join the fun? Because that was the fun part. You also need a few things to actually become a bow picker. A big one is a bow picker. You know, the actual boat and whatever stuff needs to go along with it. In Alaska, you need a fishing license and a limited entry permit. You buy the license from the state each year and the permit from someone who already owns one and wishes to sell it. In Area E, which encompasses the Copper River, Prince William Sound, and Bering River salmon fishing districts, there are about 530 gillnet salmon permits in existence. They are transferred between buyer and seller at a price mutually agreed upon. They might be your biggest expense. The Coast Guard will want to examine your boat to be sure that it meets all standards. You will need a slip in the harbor if you ever wish to get off your boat, a place to keep it in the winter, and a place to store your equipment, nets and such is handy. A trailer to get it there, a truck to tow the trailer, some knowledge of diesel mechanics, and the rules of navigation might also be useful. And safety and navigational knowledge and equipment is essential and often required. That's about it. Are you ready for the fun? The naked truth. There were 4 of us in Clark's shabby trailer last night, unwinding from several days of nonstop fishing. The conversation was casual and meandering. We listened as John L. reflected on his speckled employment history. Once a boxer, then a stockbroker, he had also tried to make a living as a diver until he began spitting up blood and bleeding from the ears. He had been a truck stop foreman with his wife in rural Missouri for minimum wage, had driven piles, and has always lived generally on the edge. Now that he is a Cordova-based fisherman, he sometimes actually makes money, is his own boss, and can usually support his growing family. John related to us how, one summer, he had become nearly overwhelmed by the stark and piercing beauty of the Copper River Delta. In unusually high spirits, when the sun made one of its rare appearances, he stripped off his clothes and stood at the forward station of his bow picker, cruising slowly along the bars and beaches. It was during a fishing closure and no one else was around. John simply motored up along the sandbars, down through the sloughs, around the swales and mud banks, smiling, ever smiling, soaking up the warmth, gentle marine air, sun, and sheer glory of the day and place. 230 pounds, 6'2" John, at the forward controls of his 27-foot gill netter, doing what he felt like doing, even though he knew it made no sense. He was obviously not worried about the embarrassment he might experience should another boat, by some odd chance, put in an unexpected appearance. He was not making a statement or being sexual. He was not even thinking. He was just being himself, guided by an inner sense, responding to a nameless feeling, flowing with his spirit as the mass of water around him flows, with the spirit of the moon flows in answer to the forces which push and pull on all that is fluid. A strange current in a strange land, life so basic we do not even know what to label it. Beneath thought, beyond cognition. John's story, almost a confession, made us laugh. We could picture his naked, smiling bulk at the bow of his vessel cruising the treeless flats, and we were entertained by the absurdity of the image. We also envied him, admired the moment that we recognized was one of rare communication with the natural world. We were even somewhat awed by his achievement, and we are grateful that he let us feel some of its goodness, that he shared with us a warmth that will linger long after the sun has set. Thank you. Thank you. You're probably going to see where this is going. Buck naked in Cordova. It was, fortunately, a very dark night. Stars pinpricked sharply through the ragged holes in the clouds, faintly outlining the surrounding mountains and enabling me to see which direction was up. The sauna in its wooded bower had been hot and relaxing. I was the last one to use it, having arrived after midnight from a long and late post-fishing season dinner with friends on the other side of town. As I toweled dry, standing alone on the dark and quiet porch of the sauna, I consider the changed nature of a small fishing town after the season had ended. Though the faint lights of the fuel dock were visible down the bay, there were no cars idly cruising the dirt road that edged along its margins. The normally around-the-clock rumblings, hummings, and clankings of fish industry had stilled. No human voice broke this silence. Somewhere in the distance, a lone boat was invisibly making its way towards an unknown destination. I would soon be disrupting this stillness by starting my truck and slicing noisily through the otherwise quiet murk. Feeling around in the dark, I found the hook upon which my clothing hung. A few weeks ago, my knee had reacted with severe pain and swelling when I leapt awkwardly from my fishhold hatch to the deck. That's what originally prompted this late-night visit to the sauna. Bending the knee sharply to get my pants on would undo much of the relief it now felt. My brain began one of its periodic dialogues with me. Why bother getting dressed? It's a beautiful and relatively balmy night, and the street in front of your apartment door will be dark. You can park there and scoot right in, and then you won't have to aggravate your knee again by getting dressed again. You can just fall to bed and go to sleep. Myself thought, that sounds reasonable. I can't argue with my brain. So I found myself walking barefoot and naked down the dark, rough path to my truck, my clothing folded over one arm. Then, just ahead of me, I heard a crunch in the gravel being what passes for soil in this part of Alaska. It didn't sound like a bear, so I stopped and stood silently as the crunching got louder. When the newcomer was about 5 feet from me and realized that he was not alone, he nearly jumped out of his shoes. The sound of my voice restored his composure. I was bare, but not a bear. And my kind of bareness, if he noticed it, apparently seemed normal enough to him, at least this close to the sauna. Recently laid off when his employer had closed the fish plant for the winter, he was just killing time until he could catch a twice-a-week ferry out of town. Tonight, he had been marveling at the northern lights, which had been moderately intense an hour earlier. Though not a fisherman, his season, like mine, had come to an abrupt end when the coho fishing was closed prematurely. Our chat over, I continued on down to the truck. The encounter had suddenly alerted me that traveling naked could have unforeseen consequences. Nonetheless, I threw my caution to the wind and my clothes onto the seat and hopped in and fired up Slicky, my trusty 1972 GMC pickup. What would happen if you got into an accident? Was my brain now playing devil's advocate? Wouldn't a flat tire on the hill in plain view of the houses there be an unsettling embarrassment? Come on, brain, nobody's awake and it's only a few miles. Still, I couldn't help but think of the potential for hard-to-live-down headlines. In next week's Cordova Times, local gillnetter caught with pants down. Fisherman bears soul. Web of mystery surrounds netter's drift. Gillnetter's gear well hung. shirtless in debacle. As I made the turn from the sauna's gravelly track through a shallow pond towards the dirt road along the bay, Slicky sputtered and died. Oh, crap. Well, at least there's no one around. Is everything okay? Queried my new friend, skirting the pond's margin about 40 feet away. He must have mistaken my tail lights for the northern lights. Not exactly, I muttered as I stepped down into a foot of chilly water. I think I'd better prepare for a hike. Getting dressed in calf-deep water without getting one's clothes wet, especially when darkness precludes seeing them, is something of a trick. I saved my shoes and socks until I had waded out of the pond. The water running off my cuffs didn't drip too much into my shoes. My new friend was headed towards town too. Hoofing past the houses on the hill, 30 minutes later, I considered my day. With the exception of my temporary companion, who had peeled off to his own quarters, I had met not a soul, been passed by nary a car, seen no evidence of another human all the way home. The season was distinctly over, and the town's level of activity clearly mirrored the cycles of the salmon on which it depends. Yet my knee, woefully out of tune with such natural rhythms, no doubt thinks I missed the boat when I went to the trouble of putting on my clothes. Thank you. Well, enough of that. 30 seconds? Perfect. The Fisher Poet's Dog, a poem. The dog's love lies dutifully at my feet. I run fingers over Apple keyboard, eons away from his thoughts and dreams of nighttime raccoons and post-sniffings. I rise. He leaps up in attentive anticipation and dogs my steps. Disappointment dully growing in eyes and limbs as I enter the bathroom.